The story opens with Alina standing in the small apartment she shares with Marcus on Concordia Station, holding a data pad displaying yet another message from her Voltari family. The message is the same as always, carefully worded inquiries about when she'll be returning home to fulfill her biological obligations, gentle reminders that she's approaching the age where conception becomes more difficult, thinly veiled disappointment that she's chosen to remain with Marcus rather than accepting an arranged bonding with an approved Voltari partner. Alina deletes the message without responding, just as she's deleted dozens before it. Marcus doesn't know about these messages. He doesn't know about the pressure her family applies, the cultural expectations she's failing to meet, the shame that follows her like a shadow whenever she interacts with other Voltari. He knows she's from a culture that values family highly, but he doesn't understand the full weight of what that means. That in Voltari society, a woman's worth is measured primarily through successful reproduction. That being childless past a certain age marks you as incomplete or failing. That choosing a relationship with a human rather than a Voltari is seen as abandoning your species' survival. She's never told him the full truth about any of this because she's afraid of how he'll react. Will he pressure her to have children to satisfy her culture's expectations? Will he feel guilty that loving him means she's failing her people? Will he understand that her inability to conceive with him, their biological incompatibility, is something that breaks her heart even as she loves him more than she's ever loved anyone? Marcus enters the apartment, and Alina quickly hides the data pad. He's carrying dinner from their favorite restaurant, smiling in that way that always makes her feel like maybe she can navigate this impossible situation. Rough day at the embassy? Marcus asks, noticing her tension. Just the usual, Alina says, which is technically true and completely misleading. How was your research? They settle into their evening routine, sharing dinner, talking about their days, maintaining the comfortable domesticity they've built over 2 years of being together. But underneath Alina's participation is a growing anxiety. They've been together long enough that conversations about the future are becoming more serious. Marcus has been making comments about someday, and when we're more settled, that suggest he's thinking about long-term commitment, possibly even children. Alina knows she needs to tell him the truth, that children are impossible for them, that her biology and his are fundamentally incompatible, that she's already grieving for futures she'll never have. But she's terrified of the conversation, of seeing disappointment or pity in his eyes, of him realizing that loving her means accepting limitations he never asked for. That night after Marcus falls asleep, Alina lies awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about the paths not taken. She could have stayed on her homeworld, accepted an arranged bonding with a genetically compatible Voltari male, fulfilled her society's expectations by producing children. She would have been respected, valued, secure. But she also would have been profoundly unhappy, partnered with someone she didn't love, living a life dictated by obligation rather than choice. She chose Marcus instead, chose love over duty, chose her own happiness over her culture's expectations. But that choice came with costs she's only beginning to fully understand. The isolation from her family, the shame of failing to reproduce, the grief of knowing she'll never have children with the man she loves, and the fear that eventually he'll realize what loving her means giving up. The conversation Alina has been dreading comes sooner than expected. Marcus's brother announces he's expecting his first child, and Marcus comes home from the celebratory gathering full of joy for his brother, and Alina notices with growing dread, clearly thinking about their own future. It made me think, Marcus says that evening as they're getting ready for bed. We've been together 2 years. We love each other. We've built a life together. Maybe it's time we start thinking seriously about next steps, marriage, eventually starting a family of our own. He says it casually, like it's a natural progression they both want, like there are no obstacles, like biology doesn't matter. Alina feels her careful control cracking. That's not possible, she says quietly. Marcus laughs, thinking she's being practical about timing. Not right now, obviously, but eventually when we're ready. I know cross-species families have some complications, but there's medical technology. No, Alina interrupts, and her voice carries an edge that makes Marcus stop and actually look at her. It's not possible. Not now, not eventually. Not with medical technology or careful planning or wanting it enough. It's not possible because I can't have children with you. We're biologically incompatible. The silence that follows is crushing. Marcus stares at her, processing this information. You're saying humans and Voltari can't have children together? Not naturally, Alina confirms. Our genetics are too different. There's no medical intervention that can bridge that gap. It's been researched extensively because the issue comes up with cross-species relationships. The biological incompatibility is absolute. She sees him absorbing this, sees the moment when he starts thinking through implications. When did you know this? Marcus asks, and there's something in his voice Alina can't quite read. Before we got together, or recently? Before, Alina admits. I've known since I was young that Voltari can only reproduce with Voltari. It's basic biology education in my culture. Marcus processes this. So you've known the entire time we've been together that we could never have children, and you didn't think to mention this? I didn't think it would be an issue, Alina says, which is a lie, and they both know it. We never discussed children specifically, because I assumed it was an option, Marcus interrupts, and now Alina can identify what's in his voice, hurt and anger. I assumed that, like most relationships, if we wanted to have a family eventually, we could. And you let me assume that. You never told me that choosing you meant giving up the possibility of biological children. Would you have not chosen me if you'd known? Elena asks, and her voice breaks slightly. Would you have walked away if I'd told you on our first date that I can't give you children? Marcus looks stricken. That's not fair. You're making this about whether I love you enough, but it's really about you hiding something fundamental about our future. I deserve to know. I deserve to make an informed choice about what I was committing to. And I deserved not to be reduced to my reproductive capacity. Elena shoots back, years of cultural pressure and shame bleeding into her voice. I deserve to be loved for who I am, not evaluated based on whether I can produce children. Do you understand what it's like to be from a culture where your entire worth is measured by your ability to reproduce? To be told constantly that you're failing, incomplete, unworthy because you're childless. I chose you because I wanted to escape that, because I thought maybe with a human I could be valued for something other than my biological function. The argument doesn't resolve easily. Marcus retreats into hurt silence. Elena retreats into defensive anger. They spend several days barely speaking, each processing what the revelation means. Marcus struggles with feeling deceived. He's not sure if he even wants children, but knowing the option is completely removed feels different than choosing not to pursue it. He feels like Elena made decisions about their future without consulting him, like she hid something fundamental because she was afraid of his reaction. And beneath the anger is real grief for possibilities he hadn't even known he wanted until they were explicitly impossible. Elena struggles with shame and isolation. She knew this moment would eventually come, but she'd hoped to delay it, to build enough foundation of love that maybe the revelation wouldn't matter as much. Now she feels exposed, her worst fear confirmed, that even the man who loves her can't fully accept the limitations that come with loving someone from her species. That week, Elena receives another message from her family. This one is blunter. She's failed in her obligations. She's brought shame to their lineage by remaining childless and partnered with a non-Voltari. She needs to return home and fulfill her duties or accept being formally disowned. Elena deletes this message too, but not before Marcus sees it. He reads the translated text over her shoulder, sees the cruelty of the expectations placed on her, and something shifts in his understanding. How long has your family been sending messages like this? Marcus asks quietly. Since I chose to stay here with you, Elena admits. About 18 months, and you never told me. I didn't want you to feel guilty, Elena says. Didn't want you to feel responsible for me failing my culture's expectations. Didn't want you to think that loving you meant I was losing my family, even though that's exactly what's happening. Marcus sits with this information, and Elena watches him process. She can see him reassessing their entire relationship through this new context, understanding for the first time the full weight of what she's carried silently, the pressure she's been under, the isolation she's experienced. I need to understand something, Marcus says finally. Is being unable to have children with me something you genuinely grieve, or is it more that you grieve failing your culture's expectations? It's a good question, and Elena takes time to answer honestly. Both. I grieve the biological impossibility because I do want children, not to satisfy my culture, but because I genuinely wanted to experience parenthood, wanted to create a family with someone I love. Knowing that's not possible with you is a real loss. She pauses. But I also grieve the cultural shame. Yes, I was raised to believe my highest purpose was reproduction. Being childless means I'm failing at the most fundamental thing my society values. That conditioning doesn't just disappear because I logically know it's wrong. It's still a shame I carry. And you didn't tell me any of this because you were afraid I'd. What? Marcus asks. Pressure you to have children to make your family happy? Feel guilty? Leave. All of those, Elena admits. And I was afraid you'd see me differently once you knew. That you'd see me as broken or incomplete, the way my culture sees me. That you'd realize loving me means accepting losses you didn't ask for. I was afraid that even if you said it didn't matter, eventually you'd resent me for it. The breakthrough comes when Marcus does something Elena doesn't expect. He researches Voltari reproductive culture extensively. He reads anthropological studies about how the intense cultural pressure around reproduction affects Voltari women. He finds testimonies from other cross-species relationships where Voltari women struggled with the same shame and grief Elena carries. He learns that what he'd been interpreting as Elena hiding information was actually Elena navigating cultural trauma while trying to protect both herself and him. When he comes back to their conversation after days of research and reflection, his approach is completely different. I owe you an apology, Marcus says. I reacted from my own hurt about feeling deceived, but I didn't understand the full context of what you were dealing with. I didn't understand that for you, telling me about the biological incompatibility wasn't just sharing information. It was admitting to a failure your entire culture has conditioned you to be ashamed of. Elena, surprised by this shift, listens as Marcus continues. I also didn't understand that by making our biological incompatibility about what I was giving up, I was doing exactly what your culture does, reducing you to your reproductive capacity, measuring your worth by whether you can have children. That was wrong, I'm sorry. You didn't know, Elena says quietly. No, but I should have asked, Marcus counters. I should have noticed the messages you were hiding, the pressure you were under. I should have created space for you to talk about this, instead of making assumptions about our future without checking if those assumptions matched your reality. They sit together together in the complicated silence of people trying to rebuild understanding after a serious fracture. Finally, Marcus asks, "What do you want? Not what your family wants, not what you think I want. What do you actually want for your future, for our future?" Elena takes time to think about this honestly. "I want to be with you. I want to build a life that's about what we create together, not about what we can or can't biologically produce. I want to stop carrying the shame of being childless, but I don't know how to let that go when it's been part of my identity for so long." She pauses. "And yes, I do want children, but I want them because I want to be a parent, not because I need to satisfy my culture's expectations. If we decide to pursue parenthood through adoption, fostering, whatever options exist for cross-species couples, I want it to be a choice we make together, not something I push for because I'm trying to fix a failure my culture invented." Marcus nods slowly. "I can work with that. I need time to process what our future actually looks like without biological children being an automatic option. But I want to process that with you, not in hurt silence. And I want you to know that you're not a failure. You're someone dealing with impossible cultural expectations while trying to build a life that makes you happy. That takes more courage than I initially gave you credit for." Over the following months, they rebuild their relationship with more honest communication. Elena starts therapy specifically focused on unlearning toxic cultural conditioning about reproduction and work. Marcus educates himself not just about Voltari culture, but about cross-species relationship challenges broadly. They eventually decide to become foster parents, providing temporary care for children whose species and